My neighbor from across the street, Miriam, she came over and we were talking about what had happened. She told us that in the late 70s, 2 people were murdered in my bedroom. When I moved home to Cape Breton, my mom was living in a really big brown house. It's huge, the biggest one on the street. It's separated into 2 apartments. She was upstairs and there was an older lady living downstairs. So when I moved in, things started to begin happening, and they didn't happen before I arrived. And when I moved out for a short period, it stopped again until I moved back. So clearly all of the things that are happening in the house are attracted and connected to me somehow.
The world is not always a pleasant place. Violent crimes can be a fact of life. But what if these crimes aren't limited to our everyday world, but are part of the paranormal world as well? Hi, I'm Lawrence Chow. Today in Ghostly Encounters, Kirsten Johnston tells us her experience of a crime from beyond the grave. Kirsten suspects the ghostly activity is related to her presence, but what she doesn't realize is just how violent and how brutal that activity is.
When I moved into the house with my mom, everything was normal. It was a good time. I had left a really bad relationship, so it was kind of a time of healing for me. My son was only about 10 months old. We were sharing a bedroom, and it was quiet for a long time, just normal. And then one night, out of the blue, we started hearing noises coming from downstairs. And it was focused underneath my bedroom where I was sleeping at the time. It was the bedroom below there. And it was really loud, booming, dragging, like as if you're pushing a dresser across the floor, and you know how loud that can be. And it was like that, but a constant, like not just one, but like drag, 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 boom, boom, constant loud noises. So you're going, God, what? It needs to stop down there, because it was for about an hour every night. And we kind of initially were like, what's going on down there? Because the lady who lived downstairs at the time, she was in her late 60s. She was an ex-nun. She was very quiet. And we were thinking, what is she doing down there at this hour of night? So for one night, it wasn't a big deal. But then it started happening every other night, and it was loud, and it would go on for at least an hour until we got to the point where I thought, you know, we really need to ask her what's going on down there, because it was bothersome. One night in the summer, we were upstairs watching TV, and it was the regular 11 to 12 time frame, and the noises started downstairs, and it was thunderous. And I went out, and I'm like, Mom, do you hear that? And she's like, yeah, it's really, really loud. And so I thought, you know what, I'm gonna go downstairs and see if she's awake. I went downstairs, and I went outside, and I circled the whole perimeter of the house. I was more scared of what was happening in my house than I was of what could be outside. And I'm looking in her windows for any sign of life, a light, movement, something that would tell me that she was awake. And I thought if she's awake, I can talk to her. And I went around the whole house and it was pitch black. You know, not a movement, not a sound. I went downstairs the next day and I said to her, you know, what's going on down there every night? What are you doing at 11 and 12, night? And she looked at me very strangely and she said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, it sounds like you're moving furniture all around the room. There's something going on. What are you doing? She said, Kirsten, I'm in bed by 9:30 every night. I haven't heard anything. What do you mean? And at that point, I'm just kind of like, what? Something's happening here. She's not doing it. I thought, how am I going to deal with this? You know, there's so many emotions going through your head. Who is it? What's happening? How do I make it go away? I wasn't frightened when I went around the house. I was more frightened when I got back in and realized that it wasn't her. It's something else. Well, I moved back to Halifax not long after that happened. And I stayed for about, 6 months, and then I decided to come home for good. So when I came back home, the lady downstairs was moving out. And I decided to take the apartment because it was perfect for me, where I was going to work. My mother could babysit. It was just, I didn't give any thought to the things that had happened downstairs. Until we were all on the step one afternoon, and my neighbor from across the street, Miriam, she came over and we were talking about what had happened. And then Miriam said very matter-of-factly, well, maybe it's the people that were murdered in your house. And we all went, what? Collective gasp, and everybody's jaw dropped because we had no idea. And she's like, oh, you didn't know? We're like, no. And so she told us that in the late 70s, 2 people were murdered in my bedroom. I believe that there's energy attached to anywhere where something bad happened. And I think it stays for maybe forever. There's a constant feeling in my house of being watched all the time. You know, you're never alone. You're in the kitchen, you get that feeling on the back of your neck and you know someone's in the room with you. And most of the time it's okay. I'll be like, it's a little uncomfortable, but you just, you work with it and you just go about, doing what you're doing. But it's unnerving. Have to understand, in my house, it's all hardwood floors. So every step you make, you can hear it. It's very creaky and very loud. It's a really old house. So one night, when I went to bed, I could hear someone walking into my room. It was very clear, distinct footsteps, creak, 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 creak. I could see a very distinct figure of a man. I can't see through him. He's solid black, but featureless. I think maybe in his case, he doesn't want me to see him. It's more terrifying to me to not be able to see the face. And he was leaning right over my bed, and he was whispering just a constant, chatter in my ear. He was close enough, almost if I'd reached out, I could have touched him, but I didn't do that. There was no way I was going to do that. You don't really know what to think because you're frightened and you're you're kind of paralyzed almost because you don't really know how to react or what to do. And I closed my eyes and waited for him to go. And then when I opened them, he was gone. And all of a sudden, off to the corner, I could hear a man and a woman talking to each other. Just a peaceful, quiet conversation in the corner of my room. It wasn't anything scary, just two voices in the darkness. And it was a muffled sound, kind of like, you know, how you can hear someone in the apartment next to you, but you can't really make out what they're saying. And it only lasted about 5 or 10 minutes, and then it was gone. So I wasn't really scared. They weren't frightening. They aren't frightening spirits at all. It's the other spirit. He is, I don't know how else to describe him, but evil and dark and menacing.
The ghostly activity in Kirsten's apartment seems to be increasing. However, our expert Patty Allen believes things are not that simple. It may be the case that the ghostly activity has remained the same, but what has changed is Kirsten's ability to perceive it. Like any sense, the ability to perceive the spirit realm improves with use. But Kirsten's new insight is a mixed blessing because her experiences are about to get far more frightening.
One night, I was getting ready for bed. I had been, you know, I washed my face and did all this stuff. It was very quiet. My little boy was in bed sleeping. And I was taking some garbage out to the porch. It's around that corner. I can't stand there. When I stand in that corner, I feel cold. I feel sick to my stomach. I feel awful. And so I put the garbage out on the porch, and I came back in. And when I rounded the corner, there was a man right there in my kitchen. He terrified me. I couldn't breathe. Everything, if I had been holding on to anything, it would have shattered to the ground because it was one of those moments where you're not expecting someone to be there and then bam, there they are. And I couldn't see a face. It was just like when it was upstairs. And so I put the garbage out on the porch, and I came back in. And when I rounded the corner, it was an immediate feeling of menace and evil and dark. And it's so instantaneous, it's hard to make someone understand, you know, if they've never been through it, how you get a feeling of someone instantly. He wanted to scare me. Because he frightened me so badly, I almost banged into him. You know, I ran at the corner and he was right there, and I just was like, oh my God. And I recoiled, and I was holding my chest because he terrified me. And I think then he just vanished into thin air like he hadn't even been there. And that was frightening. I couldn't even breathe. Couldn't think straight. I was scared, you know? And that's the first time he had done that. I think he lives to intimidate me. I think that he thrives on my fear. And I think maybe that's what got his attention, because when I first came to the house, I was broken. You know, my spirit was crushed. And so I was trying to heal, and I think maybe he recognized that and, you know, fed on it, because they thrive on your energy. That's how they exist. And so I think that maybe my fear is what drew him to me initially, and then my strength is what made him angry. My son went to his father's for a weekend, so I was alone in the house. And it was the middle of the night. And I woke up and I couldn't move. It's like something is on your chest, on your whole body, and your arms are pinned down, so you're almost like this. And you can't move. And it's really terrifying because you feel so vulnerable and helpless. You can't be more vulnerable than when you're in bed at night by yourself. And you're looking around and you can see everything and your senses are alive and you can smell and think and, you know, but you cannot move. When negative things happen in my house, I know who's responsible. And when the male spirit gets angry, it affects me physically. It's not even like it's him on top of you. It's almost like he's controlling you. It's hard to describe it. It's like there's a presence, you feel it, it's menacing, it's evil. He doesn't like you, and he's gonna show you. And it lasts for quite a while. It's a lot longer than when they appear at your bed and whisper in your ear. This is something altogether different. It's pretty frightening. And I think he knew that. That's what he wanted. I'm a writer, so one day my editor asked me to do a story on the Ghost Walk tour in the north end of our city. When I was doing it, he said, you know, do you have any stories of your own that we could incorporate, Kirsten? And I'm like, oh yeah, I've got some stories. I decided to go to the library to do some research and find out what exactly had happened. And I found out that 2 people were murdered in my bedroom, that they had been set on fire and left to die. I'm a writer, so my editor asked me, you know, do you have any stories of your own? I decided to go to the library to do some research and find out what exactly had happened. And I found out that in April of 1976, a woman had moved in there. She had left her abusive ex-boyfriend and she was starting over. And so she moved downstairs and she had someone living upstairs. One night, there was a very bad argument with her and her current boyfriend and an ex-boyfriend. And it was very heated and very loud, and apparently the lady upstairs heard this. But she didn't think anything of it because it quieted down and he went home and that was the end of it. Everybody went to bed. Well, later that night, he came back to the house and he set fire to the bedroom. Unfortunately, they didn't escape and they died there. When I found out about the murders, it made sense to me that what would you do if you were caught in a burning room? You would go for the windows. You would try to get out the door. Anything you could do to escape and live. I had the impression that he stood in that corner when he murdered them, that he set the room on fire, and then he came and he stood in that corner to make sure they couldn't get out of the room. He just stood there and he listened to them scream, listened to them try to get out as they burned. What kind of person does that? That's a person you should be scared of in life. You should be scared of him in the spirit world too. When you live with this kind of thing every day, you get used to it and it's just part of the house. It's part of the history. It's part of your life. And you either leave and don't accept it or stay and try to coexist with them peacefully.
Many psychic investigators believe the violent nature of a murder makes it more likely that the dead have not moved on. Some also believe victims can share a spiritual link with their murderer, much like the reputed eternal bonds between lovers or soulmates. Maybe then, any deep connection increases the possibility spirits will remain in our world, and a negative connection increases the chance that ghostly activity will be hostile. Kirsten's experience shows the power some connections hold for those involved. In this case, a brutal crime immortalizes an evil murderer and damns his two young victims to relive their deaths forever.
I always felt okay with the afterlife. I believe that there's something out there for all of us after we die. Absolutely, I do. And these people are trapped here. And it makes me really sad for them. So I have to try to find compassion. Even if I find it scary or frightening, imagine what it's like for them, you know, to be trapped there for 30, 40 years, reliving the same thing over and over, unable to find peace, unable to be reunited with their loved ones. It's sad. So I think I have a deeper understanding now of, the spirit world and what comes after.
When I came into the kitchen, there's my father sitting at the kitchen table where he always sat. It didn't frighten me. He never frightened me as my father. And I knew he was dead. And I said, "What are you doing, Dad?" And he looked at me and he said, "I'm waiting for your mother."
So I remember going to bed and then all of a sudden feeling somebody beside my bed. But I honestly thought that it was my youngest daughter, but it was my husband that I saw.
My mom and dad and I were very close. We did a lot of family things, like we used to, when we were kids, used to go for Sunday drives. I don't know if people do that anymore. And picnics, Lake Ontario Park. And then we had big Christmases at my mother's mother. 35 people all sat down to Christmas dinner. Everybody brought something. But we were very, very close family. So I do miss them. I mean, they were strict parents, but still, they were good parents.
Love, one of life's great joys. But does a relationship end when a loved one dies? Or could the bond of love continue into the afterlife? Hello, I'm Lawrence Chow. Today in Ghostly Encounters, we meet Jen and Maria. Both tell us about being surrounded by a loving family in life and in death. One night, over family dinner in Kingston, Ontario, Jen Potvin and her family make an unusual pact, a pact that will eventually give Jen a glimpse into the afterlife.
I've always been intrigued by the unknown, and my mom and dad would listen to me, and they weren't negative about it. They were just would listen, So it was good that I could talk to somebody about it. So one evening, we were sitting at the kitchen table, and I just said, "Let's make a family pact, Mom and Dad." And they said, what's that? And I said, whoever goes first, whoever dies first, come back and tell us, where do you go? What is it like? And they said, fine, that sounds really good. Yes, we will do that. If we are able to do that, we will do that. And I said, okay, don't forget. And they agreed. My dad died May 23rd, 1997. He one heart attack. He never had heart problems in his life. After my dad died, he was a very noisy spirit. Day one, he was banging around in the kitchen. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I would hear these pots banging and thumping, like on the table. on the counter, on the stove. I get up and I go out in the kitchen, and it stopped. It had to be Dad, yeah, because there was never any noise in this house till he got up at 6 o'clock in the morning. But after he died, there was that racket in that kitchen. And then during the day, I wouldn't hear anything more, but it was mainly in the morning I heard all this racket. I never heard his voice. I never saw him out there. He didn't cook or anything. Why he was banging all those pots around, I don't know. I think it was just his way of letting us know, I'm still here. And then I would hear the door going down into the basement, clicking open a little bit. I'd be on my computer. I was just signed on and was just clicking away, and you go down, and then you come back up. It wouldn't be very long. It'd be about maybe 5-10 minutes, and I hear it click and close. Now, occasionally I have seen my dad. I'd be on my computer, and I happen to just look up the corner of my eye and see him walking. After my dad died, I'd be on my computer, and I just happened to look up and saw him. He was just in his casual dark pants and a shirt, and just walking towards the chair. You know, he always walked kind of slumped over. Didn't say anything. He didn't look at me. I just said, oh, there's Dad. And he was walking towards the chair he always sat in to watch TV. But then he would just disappear. He never really got to sit down. It didn't frighten me. He never frightened me as my father. I didn't, you know, like maybe it was somebody I didn't know. It would be scary, but it didn't, you know, it was my dad. And I knew he was dead. So I thought, oh, he's still here. My mother was diagnosed with cancer, and her life deteriorated to a point where she just mainly stayed in bed and slept, you know, her life away. And then maybe 3 or 4 days before she passed away, I was getting ready for bed. I came out in the kitchen. There's my father sitting at the kitchen table where he always sat, just sitting there, looking normally like my dad always looked. Then I said, what are you doing, Dad? And he looked at me, and he said, I'm waiting for your mother. And then, standing right beside my dad, was my mother in her nightgown, wringing her hands and looking very worried. And she wasn't dead, but she was standing there. And then her sister, Marguerite, who had passed away a number of years ago. And Marguerite was in her dress that she was buried in. She still looked the same. She hadn't aged anything. She hadn't changed at all. And I said, okay, well, everybody wants to know what happens when you die. And my dad didn't say it. My mother didn't say it, because we had that pact and they were supposed to tell. And my aunt said, somebody will meet you and stay with you forever. And then, poof, gone. All 3 of them instantly. And then 3 days later, my mother passed away. And I think my dad knew She was close to death. He was waiting for her, and whatever they're doing, they're together and happy, I am sure. I was glad to see my dad. It made it a lot easier for me knowing that my dad is waiting for my mother, his wife, and she wanted to go and be with him because she wasn't happy anymore. She did not have much of a life. She missed him, he missed her. They wanted to be together. But I was still curious, and that's why I asked. And the answer I got, well, it helped, you know. So I thought, oh, good. I'm glad. Someone's going to meet us. They'll guide us. Maybe my mom and dad. I don't know. We don't know till we go.
Jen says she saw her parents together again, though her mom had not yet died. Our expert Patty Allen says there is the belief that this can happen with gravely ill people as their spirit spends less time with the physical body. Maria Thompson of Ottawa, Ontario, had many special moments with her husband, but she never thought that some of their most memorable would occur after his death.
I met my husband in October of 1974 when I went to apply for a position at the Bank of Montreal in Grand Bend. There was a lady that was going on a maternity leave, so I went in to apply for the position. I was hired for 4 months, and the joke became that he hired me for 4 months and took me on for life. And we were married for 24 and a half years before he passed away. We had a very fun-loving marriage. We cared for each other. I mean, it's not that we didn't have our little spats and misunderstandings, but we never went to bed angry at each other. We always made up. So it was just a very nice, loving, friendly companionship marriage. He was my best friend. He was my soulmate and my very, very best friend. Every year, Gary would go off with what I call his golfing buddies for a weekend. So I remember he got in the car, and I looked in the back seat. I didn't see him per se. What I saw was a little lost boy. Every year, Gary would go off with what I call his golfing buddies for a weekend. When he was leaving on this Sunday, it was really weird because there was a feeling that I had that, you know, I have to count the minutes that I still have with him. And I remember standing there waiting, and I said to him, you know, so give me a hug. It was such a strong, deep hug that I could almost feel my bones cracking. And when it was over with, I looked at him and I said, whoa, wow. I said, you know, you can give me this kind of hug anytime, any place. I'll take it. So I remember he got in the car, and I looked in the back seat. I saw a little lost boy. That's the only way I can explain it. It wasn't my husband that I was seeing. It was a little boy, maybe the age of 6 or 7. He was just a tiny little person in the back seat, and I so wanted to just take that person in my arms and just say, you know, it's okay. If you don't want to go with them, you can stay with me. But I thought, you know, no, you're being very fanciful. But then the car drove off, and because it lasted such a short, like only about 30 seconds or so, I really thought I'm seeing things. So they went off, and I spent the weekend cleaning the house, painting the bedroom, and just getting everything in order. I just felt like I had to have everything ready for his return. And then on Tuesday, when he was supposed to be coming home, my friend came to be with me to tell me that she needed to tell me something, and to tell me that Gary had passed away. Well, everything just stopped. That was, that was the end. So the hospital called me 15 minutes later to tell me that he had had an aneurysm go through his heart. They tried, but they just couldn't save him. The funeral was Saturday. It was really a hard day because I don't like funerals. I've never liked funerals. I've been to a few before then, but I just found them very hard. But I remember sitting beside my youngest daughter, Amelia, and listening to them do the scriptures. And when they were reading the Corinthians 13, love is kind, love is patient, love is not selfish, and that. When they got to the part that said, and love never dies, there was a spirit that I felt behind me, like an aura. It was blue. It was in the same shape as the physical body of my husband. And he stood behind me, and at that moment there was this urgency that came upon me that I had to get up. I needed to say something. You have to understand that up to this minute, I am just crying. I mean, I'm almost shaking with the way I'm crying. But as soon as I felt that aura, the crying stopped. I don't remember everything that I said, but I do remember saying that Gary would like me to thank, everybody that's there. For their kindness, for supporting his family. So on his behalf, I would like to thank everybody for coming and being there for us. I remember saying that, Gary touched the lives of a lot of people, and I would always remember him for being the kind of person that he was, the kind, considerate, always thinking about, other people, thinking of his family before he thought about himself. But when the funeral was over with, as soon as I had said what I had to say, the aura, the spiritual being, was gone. While I was up there, I knew that I had the strength to say what I had to say. And so there was like a calmness about me, because people afterwards told me that my voice never broke. And it was, like I say, it was like an urgency touch. It was like he came to me out of the urgency to make sure that everybody there knew that he appreciated all the support and sympathy that they had given him, the family. But that was the first time, and I think it was his way also to tell me that, I'm still here. My body's there, but I'm still here. I remember a week or so after he passed away, I had gone to bed, and I was going to bed sort of early-ish because I found if I slept, the pain wouldn't be there. So I remember going to bed, and then all of a sudden feeling somebody beside my bed. All of a sudden, I felt, how sometimes when you're sleeping, somebody comes into the room and you can feel them without even opening your eyes, you can feel them. That's what I felt. I felt like there was somebody beside my bed, but I honestly thought that it was my youngest daughter. So I was all prepared when I opened my eyes to say to her, yes, sunshine, just come beside me. But it wasn't my daughter, it was my husband. And he stood there and he bent over and he took me in his arms and he gave me a kiss. And people have often said to me that, you were probably dreaming this. But this was a very deep, hard kiss on my lips that I could really feel it. It was a kiss that he would have given me, the type that he would give me when he was alive. And he just said to me he was sorry that he had to leave, but it was his time. He had accomplished what he came on earth to accomplish, but that he loved me. He would always love me. He would always love the girls. He told me to make sure that I don't let them forget him, and told me that although he wasn't there physically, he would always be with me. I told him that I really didn't like him leaving, but I understood that if it was his time, that I had to let him go. When it was time for him to go, he said goodbye to me and said, you know what, go back to sleep now, everything will be all right. And then he was gone. I was at peace. I went back to sleep, and I think for the first time after he passed away, I actually had a good night's sleep. It was the most amazing and awesome feeling. It was just like as if though he was still there with me. It was almost like old times for a couple minutes. But I truthfully, honestly believe that he is with me every day. And whatever I experience, I know that he's there experiencing my happiness, my sadness, my trials, my errors, and whatever I go through, I truly believe that he's with me.
Maria tells us her husband gives her strength when she needs it most. Our experts say some believe the relationship works both ways. The ghost is strengthened by the love of the living. Perhaps Maria's love helped her husband project his aura at his funeral and fully materialize in her bedroom. Maria and Jen believe they were reunited with loved ones from beyond the grave. Even though they may not encounter them every day, they are both comforted in knowing that they are never alone.
It's very comforting for me to know that, yeah, they're waiting, you know, and when my time comes, they'll all be there, and it'll be so nice to see them again and be with them again, because we were a big family and a very happy family and a very close family.
I truly believe that a spirit exists when somebody passes on. Their spirit exists on a different level, but they do come, and if you just open your mind, open your heart to that possibility, they will be there for you.